Welcome everyone to today's webinar hosted by FSC International. The focus of today's webinar is to talk about the now open consultation on the revision of FSC's chain of custody standards. My name is Greta. I'm a member of the chain of custody team, and I will be facilitating today's webinar. My colleagues, Cesar, Pa, George, and Emily will be presenting. Okay, so today's webinar will be presented in English and simultaneously interpreted in Spanish and in French. If you wish to listen to the webinar in Spanish or French, please click on the interpretation button that is shown on the slide. It should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you can select the correct channel. Please note that all of the presenters, including myself, will be trying to speak slowly and have pauses just so it's not too difficult for the interpreters to keep up. In today's webinar, you can use the Q&A function to ask questions. You can also like a question that's been asked by another person. And importantly, we would ask that you post any questions anonymously. This is because today's webinar will be recorded and uploaded on the FSC website and social media channels. So we would ask that you don't include any personal information when you're posting a question, and that includes your name. It's also worth mentioning that we will publish a copy of the slide deck from today's webinar on the FSC website. The presentation will go for approximately 1 hour, after which there will be a 30-minute slot allocated for questions and answers. So like I said, feel free to use the Q&A function to put a question during the presentation, and there'll be plenty of time at the end that we can get to those questions. All right, so this is the agenda for today's presentation. Firstly, we will cover the process updates and timeline of the revision process. Then we will discuss the main chain of custody requirements that are in the standard 4004. We will then do a deeper dive on a few key areas. Those are the requirements for group and multi-sites, circularity and sourcing reclaimed material, and workers' rights. And finally, we'll touch on some other key changes to the second standard 2011. And then we will have our Q&A section, as I mentioned. Moving to the process updates and timeline. This slide outlines the timeline for the broader chain of custody revision process. You can see that this process has been running since July 2023, and the yellow dot on the slide indicates where we're currently at in the revision process. That is Q4 2025, consultation on the first draft. There's a few key dates to keep in mind. Firstly, the consultation is open now. It opened on the 15th of November 2025, and it will close on the 25th of January 2026. We are running 2 public webinars. The first of those is today that you're currently dialed into. We're also running one on the 3rd of December in the afternoon, 4 o'clock to 5:30 Central European Time. The other date that's worth mentioning is that after this consultation closes on the 25th of January, our team will be working on reviewing all the feedback received. We'll be making amendments to the draft standards, and then another consultation will be launched in May 2026 on the second draft of the standards. I would like to hand over now to my colleague Cesar, who will be presenting on the proposed changes to the main chain of custody standard, standard 40004. Thank you, Cesar.
Thank you, Greta. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Let's look into the changes proposed in these drafts, and I will start by taking you through the changes to FSC claims. So the first is related to FSC controlled forest management, or FSC CFM. This claim currently has zero claim contribution, same as FSC controlled wood. In this draft, it has been proposed to assign 70% claim contribution to CFM material, while keeping the condition of selling it only to FSC certified buyers and only as a raw or semi-finished material. Also, the requirements in Advice Note 17 have been incorporated, and certificate holders can claim FSC recycled as FSC mix. Furthermore, the possibility of for an output claim for a mix of FSC control woods and FSC recycled in all three control systems. In transfer system, the output claim will be FSC control woods. In the credit system, the current method applies, and therefore it will be FSC mixed credits and FSC control woods. And similar for the percentage system, FSC mix percentage. Also, the downgrading options now in accordance with the new changes are as follows. FSC mix equal or higher than 70% can be downgraded to FSC CFM or FSC mix below 70%. And FSC recycled credits can be downgraded to FSC recycled percentage. On the next topic, which is outsourcing, we have clearer requirements for certified versus non-certified contractors, requirements for service providers, and also the scope of activities that can be outsourced are defined. We have provided the option for further outsourcing, but only if the subcontractor is either FSC certified, but if not, there should be a tri-party agreement between the certificate holder, contractor, and subcontractor. And we have an exemption for storage sites and logistic activities from having an outsourcing agreement, provided there is no risk of mixing. And for the evaluation of contractors, the same method applies. If the contractor that has been selected from the pool has subcontractors, a sample of those subcontractors need to be evaluated as well. On the criteria for high-risk contractors, with the incorporation of relevant advice notes and revision of the current criteria, we have two risk scenarios: risk of mixing and core labor requirements. On the risk of mixing, those that outsource entire manufacturing process of a product or mix different input materials, such as, for example, FSC 100% and FSC control woods, or apply the FSC label, or, and this is a new part, activities that are critical for the development and maintenance of COC system are considered high risk. On the risks for core labor requirements, CLR, if there are substantiated concerns regarding the contractor's conformity with FSC CLR, or the contractor is in a country or region classified as high risk in the FSC CLR risk matrix, and our colleague Emily will explain later on in more detail. However, this can be lowered to low risk if the contractor was physically audited without a non-conformity on CLR, or there are evidence and documentation of first, second, or third-party audits of the contractor covering the CLR. So what needs to happen if that pool of high-risk contractors representing both risk scenarios should be established? From this pool, a sample of contractors should be selected for auditing. The sample is to include representatives from both risk scenarios, risk of mixing and CLR. Also, various types of activities and any other factors deemed relevant by the certification body should be considered to make sure the sample is sufficiently diverse to achieve the audit objectives effectively. Now moving on to the topic of false claims. The main changes are the first level of classification should happen by the certification body, or CB. In cases of deliberate false claims, FSC or ASI will confirm the classification. The classifications are now 2 levels instead of 3, either deliberate false claims or non-deliberate ones. And lastly, blocking consequences for non-deliberate false claims are removed. Only after 3 occurrences, the certificate holder will be designated as high risk and will be required to use FSC trace for 5 years. So as I said, this slide illustrates the flow of actions in case of false claim detection. Excuse me. Classification by certification body, confirmation of deliberate ones by FSC or ASI. And if we look to the 2 types of classifications, deliberate and non-deliberate, we will see that deliberate will result in blockage as of today, but non-deliberate ones need to implement remedial requirements. The second time, they will get a warning, and the third time will be designated as high risk and required to use FSC trace, as we just saw. And now I will hand over to my colleague, Ha.
Thank you, Cesar. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ha, and today I will walk you through the proposed change with regard to group and multi-site certification requirements. One of the most significant changes proposed in Draft 10 is the revision of group certification eligibility criteria that we are all familiar with the current requirements as shown in this slide. At the point A, each participating site shall either have no more than 15 full-time equivalents or meet the threshold of 25 employees and a maximum total annual turnover of 1 million USD. Countries may have different thresholds through applying an additional procedure 4003. As a result, one additional procedure is required, which is FSC procedure 4003A that provide a list of countries with different eligibility criteria. And also at point B, the current requirements restricts the participating sites of group certification to be located in the same country as the central office. This is aimed at having one requirement that work worldwide, not depending on any additional procedures or approval processes. As a result, The changing proposal for group certification is concluded with the agreements of no more than 49 full-time equivalents or the maximum forest product turnover of 10 million USD to ensure the threshold is up to date with the global economic developments. The forest product turnover will be adjusted and considered changing in every revision using the AAF policy as a reference. On the requirements of group certification, the limitation on the number of participating sites in each group certifications is removed. The requirements for central office auditors for the certifications with more than 20 participating sites was also revisited and amended. The participating sites do not need to be within the same country. There are some modifications that have been made regarding terms and definitions, including revising the high-risk and low-risk participating size definition. The new definitions of sets of size, sub-size, and staff headcount was introduced. In line with the changes in group certification requirements, the Section 7 of the CB standards FSC Standard 2011 is being updated. The main changes including modifications to the sampling method, including the risk index table, changing in sampling for high-risk participating size with the amendment on the definition on how do we understand high-risk participating size. New requirements have been added to standardize the methodology for auditing of group certification, especially for participating sites in multiple countries, or how to handle size and subsize at the group and multi-size levels. At the next slide, we will detail these changes. On the risk index table, regarding certification size, 0.5 is a score for certifications from 251 to 500 sites instead of 400 sites we are having nowadays. And 0.6 is for certifications that involve more than 500 participating sites rather than 400. For re-evaluation, the risk score is reduced from 0.2 to 0.1. Group certification can now be established in multiple countries. Therefore, there is a need to introduce a methodology for sampling group certification with sites that are not located within the same country. High-risk and low-risk participating sites will be sampled depending on the different formulas. The high-risk set of participating sites sample formula will be 1.5 times the risk index to the square root of X. For group certification, the set of sites is identified in each country where sites are located. For example, suppose the group certification is set up in both country A and country B, with the new size added above the gross limit. In that case, each set of sites will be identified as high risk or low risk, and the inclusion of new participating sites will be considered. In summarize, the method would be the first step, dividing all sites by country and risk index level. Step 2, applying a sampling formula to each subgroup. And step 3, when new sites are added beyond the threshold, we apply the sampling rule to those new subsets. I will now introduce the proposed change to the percentage and credit system. Regarding the requirements for multi-site certification, the significant change are in the percentage and credit system sections. That currently the requirements restrict the setup of credit and percentage system to the 5 bullet points outlined in this slide. Regarding the percentage system on the left-hand side and the credit system on the right-hand side. At the point C, all sites shall be located within the same country or in the Eurozone. During the conceptual phase consultation, we acknowledged that this would create certain disadvantages to multi-site certifications with sites in multiple countries and outside of the Eurozone. We also acknowledge the high level of support from stakeholders during the conceptual phase consultation, which requested an introduction of a set of criteria to benefit other regions through the cross-border credit and percentage sharing methods. Therefore, there is a need to address this. Taking into consideration the result of relevant pilot projects that was launched in the two regions, the US and Canada in North America, and between the Eurozone and the European Economic Area, it is important to highlight that there was no integrity risks identified during the pilot testing period, and therefore there was a strong support in enabling the cross-border credit and percentage system in the region. The working group also took into consideration the overall purpose of simplification. There was no additional framework should be added, and at the same time minimize the risk. The draft 1.0 proposed a replacement of the requirements specified currently at point C with the new requirements, with each site shall be located in a geographical area or have a certification scope that is not specified as high integrity risk. This means that multiple certificate holders, multi-site certificate holders will have the opportunity to set up the credit and percentage system across borders, provided that the requirements are met. Now I will hand over to my colleague George on the update of sourcing of reclaimed materials. Over to you, George.
Thank you very much, Ha. Hi, everyone. My name is George, and I'll be walking you through how FSC is embracing circularity and also the requirement on sourcing reclaimed materials. Across the world at the moment, there is a significant shift from linear flow of products to a circular flow, which is driven by growing concerns about environmental sustainability. In a linear flow, product moves from one direction from manufacturers to customers, often ending their journey at the point of sale or disposal. In contrast, circular flows create a reverse movement of products, where items can be returned from customers to retailers, to distributors, or manufacturers. This circular approach focuses on the return and reintegration of products into the supply chain for purposes such as repair and reuse. Circular flows can take various forms. For instance, take-back programs and product as a service models, such as leasing. These models are among the new circular concepts introduced in the first draft of the revised chain of custody standard. Now, let's take a look at the take-back model. In the context of FSC, take-back refers to a process that enables certified organizations to collect products that were originally sold with an FSC claim, whether used or unused, and reintroduce them into the supply chain. This concept aims to bridge the gap in the current COC system. Today, once a product is sold to the customer, the chain of custody typically ends. There is often no structured mechanism to manage the controlled return and reintegration of these products back into the certified supply chains. To address this, 3 key requirements, which is designed to support the implementation of take-back, have been introduced in the revised standard. These requirements focuses on ensuring product traceability and establishing clear eligibility assessment criteria for products after they have been taken back. Together, These elements form the foundation for a credible and a traceable take-back program within the FSC chain of custody scheme. Now, let's look at leasing, which is a form of a product as a service model. With the leasing concept, FSC certified products can retain their original ownership and certification status while being leased to customers. When the lease period ends, the product is returned to the organization where it can be inspected, maintained, repaired, and leased again. One would ask, why is leasing important? Currently, FSC's chain of custody standard primarily focus on sale or the transfer of legal ownership. However, as business models evolve, more companies are moving towards service-based models, such as the product as a service arrangement. Integrating leasing into the FSC system not only supports these new business models, but also encourages circularity by promoting reuse and longer product lifespans. The concept introduces the creation of product as a service certification options, allowing organizations to be certified for service provision, such as leasing. New requirements have been included under Section 13, Outsourcing and the Provision of Services, to ensure credibility and integrity of the FSC system. Specifically, traceability and eligibility assessment are established as a core requirement, ensuring that products can be reliably tracked and verified throughout their leasing and return cycles. Overall, this model offers a clear pathway for process-based certification and greater visibility within the FSC system, representing a significant step forward in recognizing and integrating circular business model into the FSC COC scheme. Now, let's turn to the requirement on sourcing reclaimed materials. As many would be aware, the requirement for sourcing reclaimed material would no longer exist as a separate standard. Instead, they have been fully integrated into Section 14 of the FSC Standard 40004 version 4, which is currently being consulted. Among the key changes, a new exemption has been introduced under the supplier audit program. If a supplier has been audited by the organization certification body or by another FSC accredited certification body in the same calendar year, the organization may exempt that supplier from the audit sample. This measure is intended to minimize the duplication of effort for FSC certificate holders. Additionally, the scope has been simplified for clarity, and extra examples of reclaimed materials, such as natural rubber, textiles, bamboo, and cork, has been included in the Annex 5 of 40004, version 40, which is currently being consulted. Overall, these changes present an important step toward a more streamlined requirement and promoting the broader goal of increased use of reclaimed material within FSC products. Now, let's talk about another topic, which is salvage wood. In the current version of the chain of custody standard, salvage wood is defined as a single category covering wood materials from both within and outside the forest matrix, all subjected to the requirement of FSC standard for sourcing controlled wood 40005. However, this has created practical challenges for certificate holders. Specifically, salvage wood materials originating from outside the forest matrix, such as those from urban environments, orchards, and others, do not fall within the intended scope of the requirements for sourcing controlled wood, the FSC standard 40005. Despite this, organizations are still required to be assessed to assess salvage wood as controlled wood, which adds further complexity and limits their usability within the FSC system. To address this issue, the definition of salvagehood has been revised. Two distinctions have been introduced. First, forest salvagehood, which is materials originating from the forest matrix, and this shall be required to follow the requirement of FSC Standard 40005, the requirement for sourcing controlled wood. The second distinction is non-forest salvage wood, which is materials originating from outside the forest matrix, which by definition would be considered as neutral material. Now, regarding claim contribution, some stakeholders have proposed that non-forest salvage wood should be recognized as claim contributing input, given that it is often recovered from waste streams or diverted from landfills, supporting circularity and resource efficiency. On the other hand, others argue that this material is more comparable to virgin or controlled and pre-consumer reclaimed wood, and therefore should not qualify as claim contributing input within the FSC system. The potential risk and benefit of this proposal are similar to those identified for pre-consumer reclaimed wood, as detailed in the accompanying document for the consultation. Now, let's move to another topic, which is pre-consumer reclaimed wood in the FSC system. For the ongoing consultation, two proposals have been presented for stakeholder feedback. Proposal A focuses on claim contribution for all pre-consumer reclaimed wood. Proposal B focuses on claim contribution for pre-consumer reclaimed wood, which originates from certified materials or inputs. Now let's start with Proposal A, which is claim contribution for all pre-consumer reclaimed wood. There has been considerable discussion about whether pre-consumer reclaimed wood should be recognized as claim contributing input within the FSC system. During the conceptual phase, FSC identified the need to consult a broader group of stakeholders to ensure a balanced and informed approach. FSC acknowledges both the supporting and opposing views, and therefore seeks stakeholder input, carefully weighing the risk and benefit associated with this proposal. Now to the Proposal B, claim contribution for pre-consumer reclaimed wood from certified input. Under the current requirement, organizations can reclaim materials from certified input within their own operations and classify them as either the parent input material, for example, FSC mixed credit, or a lower material category. However, under current requirements, these reclaimed materials cannot be used as eligible input for FSC recycled claims. They can only be used for FSC misclaims. And if classified as pre-consumer reclaimed wood, they do not contribute to claim calculations. This limitation restricts the promotion and use of reclaimed wood from certified materials in FSC recycled products. Therefore, Proposal B seeks to remove this barrier by allowing materials reclaimed for certified input, though sold with the original claim, to be used as eligible input into FSC recycled output claims through minor amendments in the chain of custody standard. FSC invites all stakeholders to review the background document, which has been uploaded for the consultation, and provide their feedback. I will end here and hand over to my colleague, Emily.
Thank you, George. Hello, everyone. So today I'll be speaking about the workers' rights changes within these standard revisions. As mentioned by some of my colleagues already, part of the revision, we were aiming to provide clarity and some more simplification. And this is part of the reason why we've not made major changes within the universal requirements, or more commonly understood as the current FSC core labour requirements, or FSC CLR. The only changes we've made are those that are proposed within the conceptual phase report in order to align and/or enhance the current requirements. So for child labour, based on some inquiries and potential misinterpretations, We've done some reformatting of this section to be clearer, as there was an idea to possibly reduce the minimum age to align with the ILO rules for developing countries, but this was not supported. So reformatting is the main change. For discrimination, we also considered adding more indicators. However, this was seen as potentially complicating and unnecessary, and didn't reach consensus in the working group. So we've maintained what's currently there. Following on forced labour, we had multiple inquiries on the topic of prison labour and whether this is permitted by FSC within our chain of custody requirements. And so we've added a clause that provides the possibility for using prison labour or work from prisoners with specific conditions, with reference to the ILO guidance on this. Notably, this was a topic that was not supported by all working group members, and that's why we have a specific question on this in the consultation, asking whether there should be a total prohibition of prison labour. On the topic of freedom of association, this incorporates the Member Motion 50/2021 with close reference to the interpretation that we provided last year, which provides for unions to have access to fulfill their representative function, including to explain to workers about unionisation and its benefits. Following on from that, as a reminder, in the conceptual phase, we had discussed potentially moving occupational health and safety into the core labour requirements, or what's currently in Section 7 of version 3.1. And this was to reflect the change status that it has at an ILO level, or International Labour Organization level. Additionally, we needed to include Member Motion 51/2021, which is about occupational health and safety and elected representatives. So the question for us was to either adapt what we had in Section 1 of the current standard, or to make occupational health and safety as a core labour requirement within Section 7 or the new Section 8. And based on the conceptual phase results and also discussion within the working group, we have proposed to keep this within Section 1, but we've elaborated requirements on occupational health and safety and also included the motion. So then on other changes in Standard 40004, what are relevant for you to know, we have combined and condensed the CLR relevant clauses that are currently in Section 1 to make it easier for users, and also include other normative documents that have previously sat outside the standard, such as interpretations and advice notes. Section 1 also now includes what was currently clause 7.1, this clause which is to give due consideration to the rights and obligations established by national law, as this means that Section 8 is kept specifically only for FSC core labour requirements, so child labour, forced labour, etc. We've also made changes to the self-assessment that was previously in Annex D in order to reduce and remove the non-normative parts, which will be then included in a non-normative document sat separately to the standard itself. Then, of course, the evaluation requirements. We've not made so many changes to the certificate holder requirements, but we have made major changes to the evaluation requirements. This has always been considered challenging by stakeholders since its implementation, with lots of questions on how to evaluate at the different levels. We've taken our stakeholder comments on board to create requirements that are a more risk-based approach, and also incorporate elements that we've brought since 2021, specifically thinking about advice notes and the evaluation of contractors, as Cesar previously mentioned. So we're proposing that the start-off point for CVs would be to use an FSC defined classification for FSC CLR at a country level. This means that all CVs will be using the same approach with still some flexibility, as there is the opportunity to lower the classification. And we've also provided an explicit mention of the use of group interviews where confidentiality can be ensured. And we're also proposing a defined sampling calculation for determining how many workers to interview, rather than the current reliance that we have, which is sufficient variety in number, in which we receive quite a lot of questions on what this exactly means. So going on, what is the CLR risk matrix? This is a table listing countries and territories, and it provides a classification for each CLR. So for child labour, there's one; for forced labour. This results from a classification, or the resulting classification is a result of the review of publicly available information reports and data sets, following similar approaches by other certification schemes. Sources include indices referenced in the advice notes, such as the International Trade Union Confederation's Global Rights Index, and we've also included some new ones, such as the Walk Free Foundation's Global Slavery Index. Following on, so an example in the supplementary document that we've provided in the consultation, this gives you some more information on the methodology and includes some example countries that we've picked at random. This excerpt on the screen right now is from that consultation document. As you see in the table, some of them have a prefix of A. The A stands for adjusted, which means that for all countries, there aren't necessarily data points. And so we also have another background index, which is a general rule of law. And this takes into consideration various indices, such as the World Bank's Rule of Law Index, the FSC's risk assessment where applicable, and the Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, or CPI, which might be familiar to many of you. So going on, how would this be used by CBs in practice? If the FSC CLR was rated as medium, the CB would consider if there is more information on whether they could lower the classification by one level. So in this case, from medium to low. And this would be based on whether they've had previous CLR NCs, or if they've had a third-party audit that covers the FSC CLR already. If either of those are true, then they could potentially lower the classification and justify it on those grounds. And then the classification would be changed to low. And the CB would apply the requirements for low, which involves the review of the self-assessment. If there are no issues with the completeness and the content of the self-assessment, then no further evaluation for this FSC CLR is required. If, however, neither of these indicators are met in order to lower the classification remains at medium, and the CB would check the self-assessment as for the low, but then also conduct a documentation review and conduct worker interviews and apply the formula for medium that we've provided in order to get the minimum number of workers to interview. This is a very simplified explanation. Hopefully you can see in the drafts and get some more understanding. But we're interested to hear your comments, so please take part in the consultation. And I'll now hand over to Cesar, who will give some more detail on other evaluation requirement changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Okay, so remaining topics from the standards 20011 applicable to certification bodies and auditors. And let's start with the topic of remote auditing. The draft has new definitions for remote, hybrids, and on-site audits, with the emphasis on information and communication technology, ITC. So basically, at the first level for both remote and hybrid audits, both the certification body and the certificate holder are required to have access to ITC, and have secure and confidential access for reviewing documents and interviewing workers. For fully remote audits, the certificate holder or the site should first be considered low risk. And I will explain in a minute what low risk means. Have no substantiated complaints or unresolved disputes or public cases. Have no major nonconformities in the past 3 years that would require on-site evaluation of corrective actions, and have no false claims incidents in the last 5 years. And it should be noted that remote audits cannot be used for main evaluations or re-evaluations, unless, of course, for traders without physical possession. So what it is considered low risk in these contexts? First, sites without physical possession, or sites with physical possession, but only of finished and labeled products. Also traders that don't have physical possession, or that have physical possession, but only of FSC certified products. Also processes that have physical possession and transformation of products by FSC certified contractors, or exclusively handling FSC claim material or claim contributing material, or both, and physical segregation is not required. And finally, for project certification, single delivery of materials to projects and all project members supplying FSC certified products. And the last proposed changes in 2011 are on derogation requests for certification bodies, waiving audits, and in what to do in surveillance audits. So one change is that certification bodies are no longer required to submit a derogation request for conducting a remote audit in cases that are demonstrated health and/or safety risks to auditors, travel restrictions imposed by authorities, demonstrated events of force majeure, such as wars, natural disasters, and so on. They can make the decision themselves and document the reasons. And currently, there is a generic derogation that surveillance audits can be postponed by 1 month to the next calendar year within the limit of 15 months. And this has been incorporated into the standards. And regarding the waiving of audits, it can be done if the certificate holder did not label, sell certified or controlled goods, or did not source controlled material. It is not allowed if the certificate holder is designated by FSC as having high integrity risks, and also not allowed if a new standard is effective. Okay, so I believe that we covered the presenting parts.
Thank you so much, Cesar. And also thank you to George, Ha, and Emily for presenting. As Cesar said, that concludes our formal presentation. So going forward, we invite you to remain engaged in the revision process. As we mentioned multiple times during this presentation, the consultation is open until the 25th of January, 2026. My colleagues have put links to the consultation platform in the chat. That's in English and Spanish and in French. You can find the draft standards for download on the consultation platform. So we would encourage everyone to visit those links. To learn more details about the revision and access all revision related documents, we welcome you to access the FSC Chain of Custody revision webpage and the process webpage. These slides will be published on our website, so you will be able to easily look back through. We'll also publish the recording of this webinar on our website. You can also fill out the interested stakeholder form, which you can find on the process page. You will be, if you sign up as an interested stakeholder, you will be directly invited to participate in future consultations. Of course, participation is entirely voluntary and you can unsubscribe at any time. Lastly, you can always reach out to us at the chain of custody at fsc.org with questions. And I'd like to just reiterate what my colleagues have said today. We would very much like your feedback on the 2 drafts. So please, through the consultation platform, provide your feedback and your suggestions for how we can improve. And just a final note, we would be super grateful for your feedback on this webinar. We know that everyone is super busy, so it is a really short feedback form. There's only 2 questions. They're optional, so you can skip one if you want to. But essentially, we'd love to hear your thoughts on today's webinar. And again, if you have any suggestions for improvements before we host our next one on the 3rd of December. Thank you so much, everyone, for dialing in today. We really appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.